Can I ask you a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Don't laugh at me or anything, but this is kind of weird. Are you the actual growl of the Hulk on the show?
No.
Okay. I was just curious.
But I am a good
When you
mimic.
said that she'd been doing it for a while, I went, oh my God, he's the Hulk.
I'm not that old, for goodness sakes. I'm only 42 or 43.
Okay, well, I
Yeah.
didn't know.
No, I was a little boy when these came out. No, that is
Okay.
it was originally Ted Cassidy, and then the guy who did Lurch.
Right.
And then I forget who they changed it to. They credit him all the time though, I can't remember his name now. I'm sorry?
Because I never see it in the
Yeah.
IMDb.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't get an IMDb credit, but Ted Cassidy, because Ted Cassidy does the original voiceover. And and he did do it for a while. I think he was the growl for a while as well.
Okay.
Because unfortunately for Lou Ferrigno, his voice is a bit too high pitched.
Yes.
You know, it's one of the hardest things for Lou Ferrigno is that, and again, because he doesn't actually hear his own voice, he doesn't know how he doesn't know first off that his voice is high pitched, or that a high pitched voice has a different connotation with people.
Right.
So anyway.
Right.
Okay. No, I am not the actual growl of the Hulk. Trust me, if I was the actual growl of the Hulk, I would be doing conventions right now.
Okay. This is true.
Yes, but I am a very good mimic, and I know what the Hulk's growl sounds like, and I'm very good at mimicking the sound of other things. So. Okay, let's get into the show. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Gonna start with The Harder They Fall.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised it has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
And welcome to the GammaCast. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is the lovely, the talented, the amazing
80s music girl.
Oh, hearing those dulcet tones always puts me at ease. Soothes the savage breast within me. Okay, tonight's episode first aired March 27th, 1981, Season 4, Episode 14, The Harder They Fall. David Blackwell, sorry, I have to put on the quotes, is paralyzed after being hit by a car. He becomes convinced with the idea that the Hulk's powers of regeneration could make him walk. Directed by Michael Vihar. Writers were Kenneth Johnson and Nancy Faulkner. Again, stars Bill Bixby, Jack Colvin, and Lou Ferrigno. We get a return engagement this episode from Danny Miller as Paul Corton. Danny Miller previously was in Animal Instinct as the football player hypnotized to get in touch with his bestial side, which led to quite a bit of violence. As another interesting thing, Al Dorsey, who is sorry, not Al Dorsey. Joe Dorsey plays Al, our
Mm-hmm.
Korean war vet in the uh, what do you call it? In the bar scene.
Okay, so he
Yeah,
was that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He did a lot of Murder She Wrote as Bennett J.
Mm-hmm.
Devlin, as well as Doc Schaefer. Devlin was his recurring character, and
Okay.
he had several other characters in it. I always like to see those guys who have those regular things. It's actually one other person I wanted to check here, Dr. Hart. What did he do prior to this? Because he looked real
Really super
familiar. Peter
familiar.
Hobbs.
Yeah.
Oh, he was in The Man with Two Brains. Oh, and in 9 to 5. Let's see here. He was in a couple episodes. Oh, the 1980s. That's where I knew him from. He was in the 1980s Twilight Zone, The Elevator to See the Invisible Man, Tooth and Consequences. He played
Hmm.
Bernard Gersh in The Invisible Man, or See the Invisible Man.
Ah.
And let's see here. Anything? Yeah, just like everybody else. Oh, he was in a bunch of episodes of Lou Grant as George Driscoll. A lot of Bernie Millers here as Philip Brower and Roy McManus. Did he have another Incredible Hulk on here? I thought he might have.
Yeah.
Nope, just
I'm
this one.
wondering if he wasn't in any soap operas or anything.
Yeah. Well, they've all done soap operas. Everyone
Well,
who does these shows have done things. Oh, that was who I wanted to see, Judy. I really liked the Judy actress who did our nurse.
oh wow, yeah.
Because I really liked her. Because you know what? I looked at her and it's like, wow, it's like a positive portrayal of Nurse Ratched. You know,
Yeah. There you go.
a very tough, nurse of there's things you have to do, and I'm not going to play your little self-pity games. But at the same time, actually portrayed her as someone who was very positive and helpful in these people's life. She did a bunch of Matlocks and something called Galter and the Golden Lance. I have no idea
Huh.
what that was, but anyway.
I don't either. That sounds
Uh,
weird.
yeah, but this was a neat episode. Interesting if for nothing else, just because it opens up with David getting hit by a car,
Yeah.
and what I found really interesting about this is
Hmm.
they open up with him at a bus stop hitchhiking.
Yeah.
And I found that to be such an interesting choice in this. It's just this idea that, I guess maybe he doesn't have the money for the bus, or he doesn't want to go where the bus is going, because obviously the
Yeah.
bus is just in this town, and he's trying to get somewhere else. But it just seemed
Right.
like an interesting thing to be hitchhiking at the bus stop.
Yeah.
And of course, the guy he's driving his, I believe it was no, I think it might have been a Thunderbird. I'm not. It's a little.
Okay.
It was in late '70s metallic brown though, because that's how you know it's
Yeah.
a '70 man. Because brown was a cool color, and he gets a blowout and can't control his car and just plows right into David,
Yeah.
and that winds up severing his spine
Mm.
in a bad way.
Yeah.
Although this is one of these things that, I really find this to be an interesting, and granted this is a fictional show, so I don't know how much weight you can give to it, but I think it kind of highlights a difference in the medical economy, how the
Mhm.
medical economy has changed over the recent years. And
Right.
this is an interesting, this is a little bit of macroeconomics for you kids. Insurance used to be highly profitable because people used to die all the time. And we'll get to this again next episode as well. Which is that, you would get a injury or you would get sick and you would either live, and it was just about coping with you living, or you
Mm-hmm.
would die.
Right.
What has dramatically changed in our modern health economy is that now people just don't die. They can
Mm-hmm.
be kept alive through various expensive means, which is a good
Mm-hmm.
thing in
Right.
abstract. We want to live. We want people to live. We don't want anyone to die who doesn't have to.
Right.
But when we go back in time to the 1980s, when really, life and death were much more solid things, and it is
Right.
amazing in here some 30 years later to realize how much more ephemeral death has become in many cases, because people will get cancer and will live for decades. People will get diseases that were once considered highly fatal even 10, 20 years ago. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea that you can live with it now with medical maintenance is truly amazing at the creativity of man. But of course, then there are costs involved, and that is what makes at least our for-profit medical system in the United States tend to be a little more rickety than it is in not-for-profit countries in the world, although there are those that make the counter-argument.
Right.
But what I love about this is that here we have David, who is clearly severely injured, may
Mm-hmm.
well need to be cared for the rest of his life,
Right.
and at no point does anyone ever mention how he's going to pay for it.
Right.
Whatever grants and charity care are available are there for him. For a man
Mm-hmm.
without any real ID or proof that he even belongs in this country, obviously
Yeah.
he's David Banner, and so unless he's an illegal immigrant from Britain or Canada, no one's going to think twice. But, you think about it, like, there's no reason for anyone to be giving him this deference except for the fact that, well, obviously it's fictional, so it helps the story. But more to the
Right.
point, I think that there is this idea that the costs associated with taking care of David Banner
Mm-hmm.
were not considered excessive because they were already taking care of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Either through grants or through insurance or through whatever. So adding a David Banner into this mix wasn't that overwhelming.
Right.
Now, David has endured this trauma. What did you think? Because a lot of this story is about dealing with this trauma of being, of losing an aspect of your physicality.
Right.
And David really does not adjust well to it.
Mm-mm.
At least at the start. And
Right.
did you feel that rang true for the character of David as we've seen him so far, or did you, how did you take that?
It was a bit of a shock, I have to admit, I know it's only a TV show, but you don't expect something to happen to the lead character, like, straight away, like 5 seconds into the, show. Here he is getting plowed over by a muscle car. But the fact that he was in the hospital and he was talking with the doctor was extremely negative, by the way. I'm not going to pull any punches with you. You're a cripple. There you go. There's my diagnosis. I'm off.
Yeah.
And it was just like, okay, maybe a little hard back in the day. I don't know. We've got a bit of a bedside manner change. Fast forward to the new millennium. But I think as far as any other person would have handled that, I think he did exactly what he was supposed to do.
Yeah,
the whole being in denial and then feeling sorry for himself and being angry and not wanting to associate with other people. And, it was just even to the point to where he, like you said, he knew that if he had a Hulk out that he could regenerate. And he was thinking this through, and he had the glass in his hand and he broke it, and he was just gonna, he was gonna cause that forced Hulk out. And he had second thoughts, because of the damage that he knew he would do.
Yeah.
And it's just, even in his own moroseness, he always thinks of others. So it was kind of tough to watch him be in that position.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I guess part of me is always like David. David is always a man who seems to be a man, who is going to take his world and move beyond it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into this a little bit in the next episode
Mm-hmm.
about the choices that he makes and whether or not they're the right choices for him. But
Right.
to me, it kind of took me a little out of it to see him not even wanting to try.
Yeah.
Although I'll be honest with you, it's kind of funny to me in this. As I'm watching this episode, I realized that in my mind I had conflated this episode with an episode of Highway to Heaven,
Right.
where Michael Landon's Angel character is working at a hospital for the physically infirmed, and
Right.
and so somehow I had in my mind this idea that after David is healed, he's hanging out there trying to help someone else deal with it, and so it was a little weird to me. But I realized, like halfway through, it's like, oh wait, no, that was an episode of Highway to Heaven I'm thinking about, not this episode. One thing I do want to say about this episode is this had, without a doubt, the most misleading trailer. I don't know if you ever watch the preview bit that goes before they do the show on Amazon, and what used to be the they do the commercial where they say this week on the Incredible Hulk, and they'd piece these pieces together.
Yes.
And you were largely implied to see, Denny Miller's character as the villain, as the antagonist, as the person out to get David.
Yeah, they really, really overly misconstrued that one.
Yeah, but, and what you realize in this, when you're actually watching this episode, that they take like one scene that's actually at the very end of the scene, of the episode, to sort of, where he says, doesn't take a genius to figure out that you and that creature are connected.
Yeah.
To present the idea that he was right there about to sell David out. And then, of course, what we do find is that, no, he is actually a really decent guy.
He is.
And, for all the trauma he endured, he is a pretty solid guy, aside from one bad choice that he makes halfway through the episode.
Right.
But getting back to the actual episode, we see that David is very morose. He does not want to do his physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And then he suddenly has that moment of, okay, I'm going to try and do something. I'm going to try and get beyond this. And he tries to get out of bed and, of course, falls out of bed.
Right.
Doesn't have a Hulk out, though.
No.
But he is feeling very frustrated. It's not outrageous enough yet. He's very angry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But he's not,
more mad at himself than anything.
Yeah.
For being a jerk, probably.
Although, interestingly enough, to see that, he knows what the Hulk would do. That the Hulk might help him, but he's still not hulking out here. And of course, but this gives our Paul Corton character, Denny Miller, the chance to come here and actually explain to him, I know what you're going through. Let me help you. Let me walk you through the process so that you can take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that, of course, leads to a nice montage where they go out to where you see David working to become a better guy in a wheelchair. And they show all the things and it's interesting in its own way to see how much less wheelchair friendly the world was 30 years ago.
Wow.
And it's like, there won't be ramps for you.
Yeah, you will have to go down the stairs.
Yeah, in 1981, here's how you're going to have to figure out how to get downstairs and get upstairs in a wheelchair, because the world isn't made for you and no one's going to make it for you. And It's a little interesting. It's amazing how much the world has changed in
Yes.
37 years since this aired.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's kind of the point of it, and that's why these are very interesting stories. But David, gets better and better at being a guy who can't use his legs, and he and Paul decide to go out to a bar together.
Yeah.
Which gets
promised free food.
Yes.
No, that was his motivation to climb the rope.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So Paul agrees to take him out. If he gets up the rope, and they're doing well. And they get there, and unfortunately, there is a drunk at the bar who, in his own way, is trying to be well-meaning. And
right.
It's an interesting thing, because, for all the characters in this story, I kind of felt like I got where Al was coming from. He's trying to be this guy who's being, but, it goes to this thing about assuming things about people that you don't really know. Because he sees these two young guys in wheelchairs. He assumes, oh, you must be non-vets.
Right.
And his thinking is, and I thought that was an interesting bit, because he points out, I was in Korea. Yeah. I know what you guys in Nam went through. And this is this kind of, it's an interesting point historically, this idea of Korea as this forgotten war, this war. I mean, not nearly as forgotten as the Filipino insurrection. But,
right.
that came about long before TV was there. So people don't really worry about the Filipino insurrection as much as they maybe could. But Korea was this war in the, Korea, for those kids who don't know, was a war in the 50s one of the many wars the United States decided to engage in that, didn't have much of a resolution. And the people who endured it felt somewhat forgotten, much like Vietnam vets felt somewhat forgotten. The only difference was that Vietnam vets got a bit more loud about their forgotten status.
Right.
And so when you see Al trying to be empathetic to these guys, you can see how he's coming from a place of goodness, even when he's making this insanely huge assumption about the people in front of him.
Right.
And then, of course, he gets angry. It's like, Paul is rightfully angry that this guy's just assuming he knows his story when he clearly doesn't. And then Al, who thinks he's just trying to be a nice guy, gets angry. And, of course, the fact that Al was pretty drunk at that point isn't helpful.
Right.
But this leads to basically a barroom brawl. And David gets thrown down the stairs. And I love Denny Miller's, Paul Corton's the character, Denny Miller's the actor, reaction in these scenes. Because first off, because it's interesting, because the barroom brawl starts, and the two guys that are kind of the instigation for it are kind of left out of it.
Yeah.
Two guys in the wheelchair aren't part of the barroom brawl. But now David's gotten thrown down the stairs, and and on one level, the character Paul kind of gets hit with what is how powerless he is in this situation, which is horrific. And but this is what I love about this, is that we see David at the bottom of the stairs have his Hulk out. And then we see him having, of course, because of the regenerative properties, we see him getting his legs back to a grand extent as the Hulk,
Right.
I mean, he is lurching as the Hulk, but he is getting his ability to move back. And what I loved about this is that as the Hulk gets up, Paul stays still.
Yeah.
Paul is just sitting there. He is watching him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to the extent that he kind of knows what's going on. And
Right.
he's never overt about it, but he does seem
Yeah.
to know what's going on.
Mhm.
And when David runs out, or when the Hulk runs out, and you know, de-hulks,
Mhm.
you don't see this, and this I think is maybe kind of the interesting aspect of this about people who maybe see in David's plight a little of their own plight,
Mhm.
which is kind of why I like when you do have people who kind of connect with David on this,
Right.
because there are a lot of people who are freaks, you know,
Mhm.
even as Paul says in the bar, says, "Oh, it looks like the freak show's starting," you know, knowing that he is being singled out because of his disability.
Right.
And of course, David. So after it's all said and done, David's
Mhm.
thesis seems to be clear. He is getting his feeling back in his legs. So he knows that yes, the hulking out is giving him physical ability back.
Mhm.
And I thought this was a beautiful thing with Dr. Hart here, because Dr. Hart is like,
Mhm.
man, if I could figure out what caused you to gain your legs back, I mean, this is a miracle. This is something that could help so many people,
Yeah.
which
I know.
they don't dwell on much here, but I think that very much informs what we see in the next episode.
Right.
You know,
But did you see the look on David's face though?
well, yeah,
Like, you
yeah.
don't really want that, right?
Well, I mean, well, no,
He doesn't know, but the way he kind of reacted to it's like,
yeah, he doesn't
no.
he doesn't want the publicity, but I also think in that same look there is this lot of regret of realizing that this could
Yeah.
help a lot of people if I
Right.
could control it, but I can't risk
Right.
I
Right.
can't risk the exposure.
Right.
My miracle cure has to remain miraculous. No one needs to know the science behind it.
Right.
But I do think that there's also some regret in that realization that
Mhm. Mhm.
if you could, much in the same way back in marriage, and like I said, we'll get to this a bit in the next episode, where he realizes that what could cure his wife was the Hulk. That the cure for
Mhm.
what was attacking her was what was destroying him to some extent.
Right. Right.
And so I know he does feel that way, but again, of course, there is this weight of the moment. Um, our our actual protagonist of this episode, Paul Corton, played by Danny Miller. He's been waiting for a government loan to come in so that he could reopen his sporting good business. And then it gets denied, so he decides to go to the bank. But the bank, doesn't feel they need to assist him. You know,
Right. Yeah.
and he does feel very much in that way, that he is being um, treated differently because
Well,
he
yeah,
is
it's
physically disabled. Yeah.
I don't want to say it's a classic case of, disabled people's, discrimination, but it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
It
Oh
could have,
yeah.
and that's the way he took it anyway.
Yeah. And I and I
So,
and I
yeah.
think it's a fair point. I mean
Mhm.
everything that the actor, I believe that was Mr. Melton, played by
Yeah.
William Bogart, who and you see him and you meet, oh, that guy. He
Yeah.
had a lot of acting over the years as a guy in glasses who's kind of a dip.
Mhm.
He was
Yeah.
Brandon
It's really.
Brindle on Small Wonder, for you '80s fans who remember Small Wonder. Um, Also Harold Jessup on the Colbys.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. He was Les Carlisle on The Greatest American Hero. Ah, this guy was all over
Yeah.
the place.
Very.
Yes, but in this moment, he is very much turning down the loan.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads our protagonist, Paul, to go and get his previously established starter's pistol, which,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, doesn't look anything like a gun.
Mm-mm.
Because it's missing the chamber.
Yeah.
It's like very clearly not a gun.
Right.
But he's going to try and hold up the bank with this. Which, honestly, I
Yeah.
think anyone looking at the gun is going to go, that's not a gun. It's clearly not a
Well,
gun,
right.
Yeah.
But, in a panic, when you get people freaking out, including, bank guards,
Yeah.
sometimes I think, things like that can,
Well, yeah, but I think in
go
that
amiss.
I think in that
Yeah.
situation you're much more likely to get shot than to rob the bank. You know what I mean?
There. Oh, he has something that looks like a gun. Let me shoot him.
Yes. I mean, maybe that was his intention all along. Who knows?
You want to really go deep into it,
Yes, but David realizes what is going on, and of course we see David in his braces because he's almost fully healed.
Yep.
And of course, Jack McGee has already reached out to Paul. And one of the things I thought was neat about this was Jack McGee says, "Hey, it could be worth $10,000 to you," and this is before he goes to the bank. He says, "Well, I have something that's worth more than that."
Right.
Which is interesting, which is to suggest that he actually needed more than $10,000 for his loan.
Well, yeah.
Because he is rebuilding his own sporting goods store, and and of course, and for what it's worth, I suppose as his point was, he had gotten it before for his previous sporting goods store, and that it's not like his credit was bad because the insurance company, after the fire, paid it all off. So his credit is good. He is just trying to rebuild his business.
Mm-hmm.
And so one understands his frustration.
Right.
But of course, when he goes to rob the bank, David goes to stop him, steals Jack McGee's car again.
I was so disgusted with Jack McGee and his, hey, this is a handicap part. I'm only gonna be a minute. Your keys are in it if you want to move it. And I'm like, what? Really? You're that much of a jerk? Okay. Well, I'm glad David stole your car.
And again, this is 1981. The jerkiness of, you have to remember, like, in 1981, the idea of a handicapped parking space was this radical leftist hippie idea.
Yeah.
And this was a new thing. And, when Jack McGee was living, the idea that you'd have a special spot just for handicapped people, goodness, that was unheard of. And it's
ludicrous,
not like he's not trying to be a jerk. It's just like, it's sort of like, as I always say, when you go back to the Marky Post episode, where he falls in love with Marky Post, who's his intern, and, he makes this point to her about, don't ever mention that you're a woman to me because I know you're a woman and I don't care that you're the first woman to do something. That doesn't matter to me. And it's like, well, it actually is this big achievement, especially in this point in history. But, it's such a rare thing for a woman to be there that he's just dismissive of her accomplishments.
Yeah.
And in this same way, it's like he's dismissive of this fact that there's a new decorum coming into the world.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that he's a bad man. It just means that he's a man who isn't thinking about other people. He's thinking about himself, which is what gets us into, which again, stuff we'll get to next episode.
Yes.
But of course, this gives David the perfect opportunity to steal his car. And that was a stick shift, wasn't it?
Was it a stick?
It kind of seemed like it seemed like a tree-mounted stick.
I was, because I I knew that, he had the braces on his legs and everything, and he was using
Yeah.
the crutch to.
I mean, I couldn't really see if there was a third pedal, but it certainly looked, from the way that
Yeah,
the
it did look
effort he was
like.
making in shifting, it seemed
Mm-hmm.
like it was a stick.
Yeah.
And there was actually even a point where he's like shifting and it's like going, the way.
Yeah. You did. You could hear the
Yeah.
clutch.
Yeah, so the car actually might not have been a stick, but I think that the sound guy decided to make it one because it worked better
Yeah.
for the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Which,
it would make more sense that it would take him so long to get from
exactly,
point A
and
to
why he's
point B.
driving so slow because he can't really upshift when
Right.
he's driving, or let
Still
alone
in first gear.
downshift when he has to stop. You know,
Exactly.
so it's best to just drive in first gear and call it a day. You know.
There you go. Unless you got some big mean guy in a Suburban behind you.
Yeah, of course that didn't work out well for him either.
Yeah. I'm gonna bash his head in. Yeah, sure you are.
Yeah, well, but I always love those moments because those are those moments, and you see these all the time. And this is my favorite thing in any. It's like whenever the guy picks on the guy who knows karate.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you're small and I'm big, and I'm gonna make I'm going to make up for my inadequacies by trying to assert dominance over you, and the person who isn't trying to,
Yeah.
There's this great moment, and I always remember it. It's from Wild Wild West,
Mhm.
where this guy comes into the bar and he's like he's wearing the black leather and he's the bad gunslinger and he's like telling everyone to get out of the bar because he wants to drink alone. And there's this little guy in a little table there who just doesn't want to listen to him. And he's this, and it's a little trigger warning. He is doing a heavy Mexican accent, but this is he might have been Mexican, so maybe it's okay. But he just tells the guy, "I don't want any trouble. I just want to drink my drink. Just leave me alone. Let me drink my drink." And the guy's like, stand up, so we can draw." And then the guy goes to the guy in the black leather goes to draw, and of course the guy in the poncho just boom shoots him. Because he's actually the fastest gun in the West, and I love that idea of the person who's just bullying everyone, and then just someone who's like, I don't really want to cause a problem, but man, why are you bullying me? You're gonna make me have to kill you, and it's not what I wanted to do. I just wanted to drink my drink.
Right.
And David just wanted
now
to
you've
help.
ruined it.
Yes. And David just wanted to help his friend, and now. And now, this gentleman with the silly little mustache hits him and causes him to Hulk out, and then he goes to go beat him with a tire iron. And so David Hulks out, crushes the Suburban or Bronco. I'm not sure which which
one of them.
Yeah, which
behemoth.
Yeah, which early model SUV this was, but it gets adequately crushed. You see the axles break, the wheels explode.
Yeah, it was great.
And then I kind of love this is David or the Hulk runs into the bank, before Paul can rob it. So as far as anyone knows, he's just there being mad, but doesn't do anything. And you see the Hulk. He throws the briefcase away where he knows the gun most likely is hidden, and then he picks up Paul and runs him out.
Yes.
And sets him on a park bench.
Yeah.
Which I also think is kind of funny because now he's like, well, now I'm stuck on a park bench. What do I do?
I know. It's like, how is he going to get back to his wheelchair? I mean, good grief.
Yeah. But
he at least took wheelchair with him.
The Hulk doesn't always think it through. Hulk not think things through.
No, Hulk not thinking.
But his idea was just to get the guy away from wherever the crime was and, let this all blow over. And sure enough, it does blow over. We again see David fully restored. And we see him and Paul. And I love that Paul isn't, like, jealous or mad.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where we get this scene. It's like, hey, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that, you and that green thing are related. And he
Yeah.
says, I'm not going to say I'm not jealous. And he says, well, not jealous, envious, which I thought was a really great play on terms.
Yeah.
That, you can think of jealous and envious as the same thing. But
Yeah.
really, jealous is being angry at someone who has something. Envious is
Mm-hmm.
just wanting something for yourself that someone has.
Right.
Both are a little bit venial, but at the same time, there's actually a difference in your attitude. You don't hate the person you're envious of. You simply
Right.
wish you had what they had. But jealousy insists on anger towards the person who has something that you
Right.
don't. So it is this idea that he is not mad that this guy has a Hulk, because for what it's worth, the Hulk may seem obviously not that good of a not be as good of a trade-off as you think.
Right.
And Denny again is like, I'm going to protect your secret. Don't worry. You go. You get out of here. I'll deal with McGee. And I do think that
Right.
this is good. And again, we'll see this again next episode. This
Mm-hmm.
idea that, McGee is dealing with the fact that there's all these people who get to know the secret of the Hulk. And he knows these
Right.
people know it.
Yeah.
And none of them are going to talk to him.
No. Yeah.
But that is the
I
end of
think
the...
that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Well, because really what
Yeah.
it is people... Once you get to know David Banner and the Hulk, you realize that Jack McGee is the bad guy. Although Jack
Yeah.
McGee never sees himself as that. He's just a reporter. He just wants to know the truth. And one almost wonders if David would speak with him, that they might be able to find some common ground.
Right.
But, of course, that's a big risk for David to take. And it's a gamble that's not worth the payoff.
Right.
Okay. So 80s Music Girl, any final thoughts on tonight's episode?
I really looked at the relationship between Paul and David. I know this word bromance has been bandied about for a few years now, and I don't think people had that connotation back then. But it really felt like they became friends through their own understanding of their plight.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, David, like we said, was just really, he couldn't understand or bear the fact that he was going through this trauma. And here is another person who had already gotten past that point and was only there to help him.
Mm-hmm.
And, through David's own, and people in a situation like that, through their own stubbornness, they just can't see, past the nose on their face, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy was, everybody was being like really super nice, and they had like the card games on the ward, were the rehabilitation, and after a while he kind of, just kind of ate some humble pie and went down there and did what he had to do and made friends with everybody. But I think he probably understood that even though he was going to be cured because of his transformation abilities, Paul wasn't. And I think he kind of had, I don't want to say sympathy, but in a way it was kind of like that, but it wasn't just mock sympathy. It was empathy,
Mm-hmm.
and really at this point, really wanted to help him and wanted to see him succeed because of all he'd been through.
Yeah.
So I think this was kind of like a life lesson for David.
Well,
even though he's been so much already, but this is, he's, learned quite a bit, I think.
Well, you know the phrase, blood is thicker than water.
Mm-hmm.
the actual derivation of that phrase, it's an ancient Greek, I mean, it's translated from ancient Greek, but the actual phrase that we get that term from is that the blood of battle is thicker than the water of the womb. Meaning that
okay.
people that share a trauma or share an event will be closer than those whose only allegiance is birth, which is
Right.
an ironic thing to realize when you realize that we use it in the exact opposite meaning of what it's actually intended. But I always look at that, and I think in this, that is what you're seeing here, is that David and Paul become closer because they've both endured something. Now, yes, David doesn't have to endure it for the rest of his life, but they find empathy with each other because Paul helped David when he was weak, and yes, David succeeded, but Paul has had the change. Paul is not embittered because they've both been there, and that's a beautiful thing. And I do really like this episode. I really like what they're doing, and it's an interesting thing when you look at, a few episodes ago, King of the Beach, this episode, and then going into a couple episodes from Here Have Nelson, this idea of, and even if you look back on this, when you look at Wildfire, and you had this issue of the woman who wasn't a traditional woman, or not Wildfire, but, something about the line where it's the wildfire they're fighting.
Right.
Yeah, because the actual episode Wildfire was about the oil well. This was something different. Right. But it is this idea of using the Hulk as a symbol of various people that are outside of society and who have to endure that negativity, that judgment, and how being a Hulk would be helpful, even as it is, not as helpful as you would like, because it's great to be a Hulk and deal with those who have wronged you or slighted you, but at the same time, being a Hulk is not helpful to have an actual life. So I do think that I think that's it's a great encapsulation of the cultural shift that occurred in this country between the 60s through the 70s into the 80s, and still goes on to this day. This acceleration of thinking about other people as human, and the differentiation between our older ideas, where hey, it's just fine to park in a handicapped parking spot, and a world where we are generally, honestly, a little offended by the idea that, dude, that's not your spot,
Yeah.
Where we, and you and I, we've both lived through that era. We remember when that was a new thing, but still, we're adult enough to know that, dude, that's not the way society works. So it's interesting to watch, and which is one of the reasons why I love The Incredible Hulk as a series. Okay, but we've gone on much longer than we should have. 80s Music Girl, would you like to give your social media?
Absolutely. I am at 80s Music Girl on Twitter, 80s Music Girl on Instagram, and 80s Music Girl on Facebook.
Excellent. And of course, you can always write to me in the old-fashioned email way, the way our Moz and Poz once did, at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And of course, follow me on the Twitters, as I sadly can no longer live tweet The Incredible Hulk 7 o'clock on Saturdays on MeTV, because it's not on 7 o'clock on Saturdays on MeTV anymore. It's been moved to Heroes and... Yeah, boo, for real. It's been moved to Heroes and Icons, which is 140 here in New Jersey, but at 5 o'clock on weekdays when I'm at work. So I can't really live tweet that now, can I?
No, you cannot.
No, so it's a very frustrating world for me right now. But you can follow me on Twitter as I live tweet other things, because I will do something eventually. At Charlie Esser, that's CharlieEesser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. Thank you for hulking out with us, ladies and gentlemen. Please hulk out with us again.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.